friends, to AA Recovery Interviews. I'm your host, Howard L., and I'm an alcoholic. Sober since January 1st, 1988, one day at a time. I'm grateful you've joined us. AA Recovery Interviews is the podcast where Alcoholics Anonymous members from around the world share their extraordinary stories of experience, strength, and hope. Today's show is an encore episode of my interview with MaryCeline L., first released in May 2021 as the 28th interview in the AA Recovery Interviews podcast series. MaryCeline got sober in March 2013. When the pandemic hit last year and the 2020 AA International Convention in Detroit was canceled, I was very disappointed that I wouldn't have the opportunity to meet AAs from around the country and the world. Fortunately, AA meetings rapidly turned into Zoom meetings, and through them, I've met some of the nicest people in the world. My guest on today's podcast, MaryCeline L., is one of those people. As I heard her share time and time again in a couple of Zoom meetings we both attend regularly, I was enthralled by her shares. The wisdom she conveyed was that of one who'd fought hard and suffered much in her battle for sobriety. With multiple stints in AA since 1999, her relapses became increasingly miserable and hopeless. When she finally claimed her current sobriety date in 2013, it was at the desperate end of round-the-clock drinking. From the ashes, her AA program was reignited under the careful guidance of a loving sponsor, whom it appears God placed in her life. From there grew her humble commitment to reside in the middle of the program, replete with the kind of service upon which truly solid sobriety can be based. As you listen to MaryCeline's story, you're likely to identify with many of her experiences, as I did. Her cautionary yet instructive tale inspires gratitude that the teller survived and returned to the program to convey such a vital message of experience, strength, and hope. That she survived to become an active member with contented sobriety, living in the middle of the herd, is proof that surpasses all understanding, that AA does indeed work, if we work it. For this podcast, the 28th episode in AA Recovery Interviews, please allow me to share with you the next 60 minutes with my friend and AA sister, MaryCeline L.
Hello, my name's MaryCeline, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, MaryCeline. I'm so glad that you were able to join us this morning. This is a really kind of a momentous morning in that yesterday the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention lifted the mandate for masking and social distancing, which is huge for AA. Had you heard about that?
Yes, I have, and it is very exciting. It's been a long year plus.
It has, hasn't it? Have you had the opportunity to go to any live meetings since last year at all?
I attend a beach meeting on Sunday mornings, a big book meeting, and I live in Florida on the East Coast near the beach, and I love that beach meeting. We read a chapter from the big book, and then we have a little swim break in between, and then come back and, so it's really a different kind of meeting, but it's beautiful because it's in the morning and the energy is fresh and it's very peaceful and meditative.
Sounds really invigorating, too.
It is.
That's the first AA meeting I've ever heard of where people wear their bathing suits to it. That is...
Well, in the winter, we're not wearing bathing suits. It actually can get quite cool here. And that's fun, too. Sit in the fresh air and the breeze, and it's great.
Yeah. Well, before we go any further, I just want people to know that MaryCeline is your first name and your last initial is L. Just so people won't think that I'm using Mary with Celine as your last name, that we'll get that out of the way up front.
The first meeting I went to and I said, "Hi, I'm MaryCeline," somebody said, "No last names." I said, "No, it's my first name."
So you've been doing Zoom meetings, and I guess that's where you and I met last year, was at the Zoom meetings out of London, of all places.
Right.
So this American invasion of London, or of Great Britain that you and I have been a part of, how did you find your way to those meetings?
There's a woman in my home group down here in Florida that lives part of the year in London, and I knew nothing about Zoom when the pandemic came. She was back in London at the time and sent a message and said, "Oh, there's this Zoom meeting if you want to try it. So I started going to a meeting over there, and I really enjoyed it. And I enjoyed the people over there. I felt immediately at home. And then I started a Zoom meeting here for my local home group.
Have you done any hybrid meetings there in Florida where you have a Zoom and a live component?
I have not. I haven't tried one of those yet. Most of the meetings here are either or.
Yeah, I get that. We have a couple of meetings here that we actually did our first hybrid meeting of one of my groups the other day, and it really worked very, very well. The men who set it up were using their laptops and external speakers and that sort of thing. And then yesterday, a very large men's meeting that I go to had about 45 men in the room over at the church that we normally meet at. And then we had about 35 guys who were on the Zoom. And we had a big screen in front and a LCD projector and external mics. And it was about as seamless as you can get. It was very cool the way it was done.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the convenience of it because it takes me a half hour to drive to that meeting and a half hour back. And we're thinking for some of the larger meetings that we're going to continue with Zoom. Do you think that's going to be the case with the London meeting that you go to?
I hope so. I believe that the man who started that meeting said he was going to continue on.
Oh, good.
Yes, because you know what? When he started the meeting at the beginning of the pandemic, what he decided to do was a 90 and 90. I started a little bit into the 90 days, but I mean, I was with these same people every day for, I would say, about 80 days.
Wow.
And it was amazing. It was such a beacon of hope and strength during a dark time.
Yeah.
And we all really got to know each other. And it really felt like a family.
Yeah.
And it was just amazing.
Now, how many years have you been sober?
I was sober 8 years in March. My anniversary is March 4th. 2013.
It's 8 years. That's amazing. Well, I notice you guys have quite a presence on WhatsApp. I'm just amazed at the messages that go back and forth of support and hope and love. It's just, I never really did a WhatsApp before, so this is a new experience for me, but I'm just amazed at how close people seem to be on that.
I'm new to it too. You know, what I've learned through this situation is AAs are really resourceful.
Yeah.
I mean, we heard about the pandemic, the shutdown, and right away, people figured out how to use Zoom. You know, we figured out how to connect. I'm originally from New Jersey, and I've been in Florida just about 2.5 years. So when the shutdown started, immediately there were groups on Facebook for local meetings in New Jersey that I had gone to when I was living there. And so everybody has managed to stay connected. And there's a lot of sharing about when meetings are, support, like you said, people reaching out and hooking up with sponsors and other networking. It's remarkable.
Yeah, not to mention the new people who have never been to a live meeting.
That is amazing. It's really a miracle. I've seen a few people who have started on Zoom and have reached their 1 year mark on Zoom.
So you've been sober 8 years, and was that your first run at sobriety, or had you tried previously?
No, it was not. My first trip to AA was in 1999, and I stayed sober for a while, and then I relapsed.
What was going on in your life in 99 that made you decide to go into AA?
My drinking was out of control. I was drinking every day, and I was approached by my boss at work. He took me in for a talk, and he said, you know, there's something wrong with you. He said, what is it? And I said, I'm an alcoholic. He's the first person that I ever acknowledged to that I was an alcoholic. And at that time, he said, great, you said it. Now, what are we going to do about it?
Wow.
Yeah, so that was my first introduction to the we. He was not in recovery, no, but he knew people who were. Yeah, so he reached out to somebody, and I went to my first meeting.
That's terrific. So he had a certain amount of respect for Alcoholics Anonymous.
Oh, absolutely.
Instead of showing you a pink slip in the door when you told him you were an alcoholic, he offered to help by getting folks in touch with you.
Exactly.
Wow, that's amazing. So that was 99, and then how long did you stay sober in that first attempt?
About 6.5 years.
Really? Wow.
Yes.
Wow. And were you active in the program during that period of time?
What happened was I started out, I have to say, I didn't want to go to AA under any circumstances because I had that contempt prior to investigation. My mother was an alcoholic, and she had come to AA, and I was just so resistant to going. But I do remember that the first time I went, I could immediately feel the love from the people that I met there. And I did start going, and I started doing the steps with a sponsor. And we finished steps 4 and 5. And unfortunately, that was as far as she had gone with her sponsor. So I was left with all that stuff. And I felt uncomfortable, and I felt like something was missing. So instead of, I started looking elsewhere for it. I started going on spiritual retreats and, looking, reading a lot of books, and I started cutting back on my meetings. And eventually I drank.
So 6.5 years later, from the 1999, you drank. Did you find any of what you were looking for in any of those other approaches?
I found some relief and some comfort, but it still wasn't enough. Now I still felt like something was missing.
Can you identify what that something was as you look back?
Love and acceptance of myself, I suppose. I still felt unworthy.
So after 6.5 years, you went back out. How long did you stay out before you came in again?
I was out for 2 years. I had gotten in a relationship early on in those 6 years. And the man that I was with died. That's really what started off the drinking again. And I drank. I got to a point where I was drinking around the clock, and I almost died. I was in the hospital for like 2.5 weeks, and then I had to go to a subacute rehab because I couldn't walk. I couldn't write my name. I could, I couldn't take care of myself. So that was a long haul. And after that, I thought, I believed to the depths of my soul that I would never drink again. And I didn't drink for 3 years, but I didn't come back to AA because I thought I was done. And then one day, I just thought it would be a good idea to have a drink. And I did. And very rapidly, I would say within 6 weeks, I was back to drinking almost around the clock. And everything kind of crashed and burned quickly.
What year was that?
That was in 2013.
So when you picked up the last time before, I guess you finally got sober, was it that you couldn't recall what had happened the last time, or it didn't have the impact that it had at the time previously? Or was it that you didn't care? What was behind the picking up at that point?
No, I think it was that I didn't remember how bad it had been.
Right. Even though you're in the hospital, you're facing all of these consequences physically from the previous bout with the disease. When you decided to pick up again, it's as if that never happened, or you just couldn't recall it with sufficient emphasis, or...
Like it never happened. It would be different this time. Delusional thinking.
That sounds like a really rough road you had from 99 to 2013. It
was a really rough road. And there have been times in the past where I've regretted that I didn't get this program the first time I walked in the doors. And I used to have some shame around that. But today, I accept that I had to go through everything that I went through, and I had to drink every drink that I did to get where I am today. And that today, I love this program. I cherish my sobriety. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. And I never had that feeling in the past.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? And I can hear it in your voice and see it in your demeanor that there seems to be a real gratitude that's coming through for being sober now after everything you went through on that hard-fought road to finally getting sober. That's amazing.
I'm tearing up a little.
Yeah, well, that's okay. That's what this is. This is what it's all about.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier that your mother was an alcoholic and in the program for a while. Do you remember about your early years and your family of origin that might have pointed you in the direction that you ended up on that road?
There's a lot of alcoholism in my family.
Really?
Both my parents were alcoholics.
Mm-hmm.
Both my grandparents on my mother's side, my aunts and uncles. I'm the oldest of 6 children, and I have one brother who is not an alcoholic. All the rest of us have this disease. When I was young, in early grammar school, my father worked away from home, so he would only be home, on the weekends or every other weekend. So what I remember is coming home from school, and my mother would be passed out on the couch. And, there was a lot of chaos. She wasn't able to make us meals or really take care of us. And I was always being told to, go away, leave her alone. So it was a scary time. Felt very unsafe and unloved.
Yeah, that's a tough thing to feel when you're just a little kid. You said you were in grammar school when this was going on, so you had younger siblings who were also affected by this. They got home from the same school you were going to and had to encounter what you were seeing, huh?
Yes, and at the same time, I had a couple of siblings who were still young enough that they were home with my mother all day.
Oh, my.
So,
yeah. What was your dad doing when all this was going on? Was he aware of this at home, or what was happening with him?
He was working away from home. So he would just be home on the weekends. Like he would come home on a Saturday morning and then have to go back to whatever location he was working at on Sunday evening. So I can remember that on Fridays and early Saturday mornings, my mother would be scrambling us to clean up the house and make everything look as if it were okay, whereas it had been chaos all week long. Pretend like everything was under control when he got home. My father did know my mother was drinking, and I can remember from a young age hearing them argue about that. And I remember the behaviors, the bottles hidden in different spots. And I remember my father talking about marking the bottles in the actual cabinet to see how much he was trying to keep track of how much she was drinking.
Did she find a way around that, or did you perceive that she was still sneaking the drinks?
She was definitely still drinking. I would go to pick something up out of the laundry hamper, and there'd be a bottle hidden in there, or I'd open up a cabinet, and there would be part of a drink in there.
Wow.
And those things frightened me. I remember knowing it was wrong and being really afraid.
Yeah, that's a scary thing, especially when you're that young. So you were largely without a father during the week. Now, when he came home on the weekends, was he also drinking on the weekends, or was he there for you and your siblings?
He drank also, but I would say his alcoholism hadn't progressed to being really out of control at that point. But I don't remember really doing anything fun or anything like that.
Wow.
He was just there.
Did this continue through your adolescence and into your teen years?
My mother stopped drinking for the first time when I was in 4th grade.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
What was that like?
Well, originally what had happened that stopped her was we were eating, I remember this so clearly, it was Easter, it was the night before Easter, and we were eating dinner at the dinner table, and she was drinking, and what happened was she passed out, and she fell backwards in her chair and cracked her head open on the dining room hutch. I thought she was dead. I remember being it was really traumatic. Because she was bleeding and passed out. But she stopped drinking at that point. I think she went to AA a couple of times, but she didn't really stay. That was in the early 60s, so I don't think there were a lot of women in AA at that time. Right. But she stayed stopped for quite a while, and my father's alcoholism started progressing, and then they got divorced when I was 20 years old after I had graduated nursing school, and she started drinking again.
So she stayed sober for 10 years or so, or?
More than 10, probably
12 or 14.
Yeah, about that.
Wow. But she did that without AA?
Yes.
So your exposure to how to stop drinking or whatever practical experience you had around somebody who wasn't drinking was somebody who was not in AA?
Right, initially. But I don't think at that age, I didn't really think about it that much.
Yeah. So when did you have your first experience with alcohol?
I was in high school, and I had had a fight with my boyfriend. I was 17. My parents were out, and I remember going downstairs and finding there was a bottle of something terrible like sherry or port that the pastor had given my parents for Christmas. Oh my. And I drank that. And the first time that I drank to get away from my feelings because I was upset. And somehow that's right what I went to, alcohol.
So it worked.
Yeah, it worked. I got sick and felt terrible physically, but, it was that my first drunk was to get away from emotional pain.
The trade-off. So you got away from the emotional pain against the physical consequences, getting sick afterwards. Did you make the conscious decision to continue, or did you say, that's enough of that, I'm going to stop? Or what was your thinking at that time?
I didn't really drink again. I didn't make a decision to stop. I didn't drink a lot, really. I mean, I would drink at a party a little bit. I think when my drinking really started taking off was when I went to nursing school. I went to nursing school in New York City, and it was very stressful. It was a lot of work, and, the other girls drank, so that's when I started really drinking. From the beginning, I kind of never knew how it was going to go. Sometimes I could drink a lot and it would be okay, and sometimes I would drink and I would black out. Was it with the same intent that you had drank that bottle of sherry or whatever that was at the time? Was it to get away from the feelings, or was it to relax? Or what was behind that decision? I would say it was a mix. I'm sure I was drinking more because of the stress, but it was also because I was of age and we could. And, we would have parties, we would go out together and, have dinner and have some drinks. And some of it was fun. Some of it, I would say, was a stress reliever.
Okay, so that would have been in the 70s. Were you also involved in drugs or pot or any of that sort of thing at the time?
No, not at that time.
A number of people I've interviewed just stuck to just drinking. How did you find the alcohol affected you in terms of your studies and in terms of getting through nursing school? Did it make it harder, easier, or was it imperceptible?
I am sure I could have done better in nursing school if I hadn't been drinking. I don't remember consciously that I was physically sick, really, from drinking, but I would be tired.
One of my earliest interviews was with a man by the name of Scott B. He actually was involved in teaching a course to medical students on alcoholism and drug addiction. One of the points he made was the lack of understanding and the very, very minimal training that prospective doctors and nurses get regarding the diseases of alcoholism and drug addiction. Do you recall any courses that you had, or was there anything within the curriculum that flew in the face of what you were doing on your own after hours?
Not at that point. I remember we learned about different liver diseases, the impact of alcohol. We learned a little bit about alcoholism. It's a very small part of our curriculum at that time. As a matter of fact, a year or two after I graduated, working in ICU and seeing a woman who was in there for alcoholism and she had esophageal bleeding. I can remember so clearly looking at her and thinking, how did she let herself get like this?
So you could not draw any personal connection to what she was going through and what your future might hold.
Oh, not at that time, no.
Especially when we're that age and after graduating, it's so easy to feel unaffected by the rest of the world. But being a nurse, did you find you were a little bit more attuned to that from the standpoint of it affecting you positively or negatively, or were you detached from it and that's what helped you not internalize the potential for it to cause problems in your life?
I don't think I tuned it out or anything. I just think I lacked awareness.
Once you had your nursing degree, you went to work as a nurse?
I came back to New Jersey and worked in New Jersey.
So what did your drinking or your alcohol use look like in the succeeding years after you started working as a nurse in New Jersey?
I should say first, I got married right out of nursing school.
Oh, you did?
Yes, I was 20 years old. I wanted to get away from home. I was looking for love. Like I said, I was always looking for love from an early age. So I thought that situation, being married, would make everything right. Now that I look back, I can understand that I was looking for relationships and situations to fix me and to give me what I was missing. And that marriage only lasted 2 years. I knew at the time that I was getting married that I shouldn't do it, but I was afraid to say, I don't want to do this. It was like everything was on a roll, moving forward, and I couldn't stop it. So that marriage ended up being annulled.
I see. So is it fair to say that marriage was unfulfilling?
Yes, it was. I was a new graduate nurse, and I was working different shifts, and the man I was married to worked days, and we were young, and there was a lot of partying, but, because I was homesick for where I had grown up by the beach, it was just, we were just kind of on different paths. Was he a drinker as well? He was a drinker too. I don't know where he is today. I don't think he did have alcoholism in his family, but I haven't seen him in many years. So I don't know. We certainly did our share of drinking at parties, and I have no idea where he is today. Yeah. Well, being married at 20 is, I think, difficult enough because maturity-wise, we're probably not at the point where we can be making really adult-type intelligent decisions, but the ability to actually get married at 20 and see it last for 2 years. Do you feel that you walked away from that marriage with understanding or with confusion? Confusion. Yeah? In what way? I felt like a failure because the marriage didn't work. And, and that I was miserably unhappy. But I think that I carried that as my, blame on myself. Yeah. That there was something wrong with me, that it didn't work out. Did that cause your drinking to increase or ratchet up, or were you still drinking about the same at that point? What was your response to that? I was slowly progressing, I would say. I moved back to where I was from, by the shore, and I worked with a young group of nurses, and we would go out and after work and listen to music and drink, and, I was drinking a fair amount, but, still having fun at that time, I would say. And it wasn't impairing my work or anything like that. So were you keeping up with your friends? Were you leading your friends? Were you behind their use? Were there other alcoholics or potential alcoholics in that group? Probably potential alcoholics. But around that time, when I was in my mid-20s, I was seeing a guy who suggested to me that perhaps I was an alcoholic. And really? Yeah. How did he do that? I'm just curious. What did he say to couch that particular exchange? I guess I had had a lot to drink, and he said, I think you might be an alcoholic. And he wanted me to try to stop drinking. He had grown up in an alcoholic family. So he said, see if you can stop. So I promised him that I would stop for 6 months.
Yeah?
And
Wow.
I didn't drink for 6 months. And I remember my friend saying to me at the time, "Oh, you're not an alcoholic." I lasted 6 months, but I remember at that time, really, I couldn't wait till those 6 months were up so I could prove to him that I wasn't an alcoholic and I could go ahead and go back to drinking.
Okay, so was that the longest you had been sober to that point?
Yes.
Did your stopping drinking at that point for 6 months, did that improve the quality of that relationship? Did it make it more bearable, or were you miserable not drinking?
I was miserable not drinking. And again, what I've learned about myself looking back is I chose people who were like my mother. They were emotionally unavailable. And I kept picking the same type of relationship over and over again. And that's what this relationship was like. I can remember feeling very depressed and feeling my marriage had failed. This relationship wasn't working. I can't make anything work,
So was that the feeling after 6 months when you started drinking again, or was that something that came back gradually, or when did that thought occur to you?
I would have to say that was pretty consistent through. I was with that guy for 2 years, and probably towards the end of the 2 years.
Oftentimes, whenever it was that I stopped drinking or using, I did it with the intent of maybe drinking or my drug use is the cause of my problem. And then I would stop for a little while, but not long enough for it to really affect me, but long enough to prove that it wasn't causing that problem. I remember any time I would quit, it was with the intent of proving to myself that I could quit, but I never drew any kind of connection between the drinking and problems, so that whenever it was I started drinking again, I had eliminated drinking as a problem. Did that occur to you as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
I can agree with that. And I remember my belief at that time was just that this was my lot in life. These things were happening to me. And I remember feeling like a victim.
Yeah.
I don't remember feeling that I had, knowing that I had any power to change any of that. I was just a victim of my circumstances.
So taking a look forward from that particular time in your life till the point at which you got sober the first time in 1999, what did those intervening years look like in your life?
I left that relationship, and then shortly after, I met the man who would become my second husband.
Yes.
And I met him out at a bar, of course.
Sure.
And, that was kind of, he needed rescuing, so I jumped right in and rescued him.
Okay.
And we got married after being together for only 9 months. And we had fun in the beginning of our marriage, but he drank like I did. And there was a lot of drinking in our early marriage. And I remember we started to build a house, and he said to me, "No more drinking on school nights." And I remember feeling really defiant at that time and saying, "Who's he to tell me when I can drink and not drink?" And that's when the sneaking started taking off. And I started, I would stop and get something to drink before I went home, and the hiding and all that. All those behaviors that had frightened me so much when I was little, the hidden bottles and the sneaking and everything, I started doing them myself.
Oh, my.
And we were married for 6 years. Then I had a daughter. I did manage to stay sober or not drinking when I was pregnant. And I remember that being a challenge. I remember wanting to drink. Yeah. Frustrated because I couldn't a little. But my drinking kind of slowed down then when she was young. A baby and, into her younger years. But then it started, I was unhappy in the marriage, and I was drinking, started drinking more. My drinking definitely escalated when she was in grammar school.
Wow. So once she was born and in her early years, baby, toddler, until she was in grammar school, were you trying to establish yourself as a responsible drinker or a moderate or occasional drinker for her sake? Or did you perceive any problem that was going on at the time that made you want to slow down?
Not really a problem. We had a lot of friends, and we're pretty social, and, friends would come to the house for dinner and we would drink. I don't remember trying to control it so much then. It was still at the point where it felt like we were still having fun. Although, there were times when I would drink when I was by myself or before my husband got home from work.
We'll be right back. My friends, if you're enjoying AA recovery interviews, I invite you to check out my latest audiobook, Alcoholics Anonymous, the story of how more than 100 men have recovered from alcoholism. This is the word-for-word, cover-to-cover reading of the first edition of the Big Book, published in 1939. It's a relaxing yet meaningful and engaging way to listen to the Big Book anytime, any place. Have a free listen at Audible, iTunes, or Amazon. While you're there, search for my other audiobook, Lost Stories of the Big Book, 30 original stories from the first and or second editions missing from the third and fourth editions of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's also available from Amazon as a Kindle book or in paperback if you'd like to read along. You're going to love it. And we're back. You were married for 6 years. Your daughter's in grammar school. So were you raising her by yourself at that point?
No, my husband was there.
Oh, he was. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. No, I'm sorry. We were married for 6 years before we had her.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, I get it. Yeah. All right.
He was, he was there. And he was involved with her. They enjoyed, doing things in nature, and he would take her for walks, and she was interested in animals and everything. So he was a participant, he participated in her care. And, he was into sports and did triathlons and this and that. A lot of our weekends were revolved around what races he was doing or whatever.
Looking forward from that point, she was in grammar school, and you said you started drinking more at some point along the way. What did that look like?
That started to look like drinking kind of whenever I could.
Really?
I remember there would be a PTA meeting, and I would go to that because I knew that the ladies all went out for a drink after, but I would drink some before I went, and, go to the meeting, then go out with them and probably drink some more. It was more of a focus then.
I see.
By that time, I was drinking every day.
Every day. Were you still working as a nurse at that point?
Yes, I was.
So you were working as a nurse, raising a child, drinking every day. How did you handle that?
It wasn't easy. I remember that.
I guess not. That's a kind of obvious question, but I had to ask.
No, it wasn't easy. But at the time, I thought I was managing okay,
Really? Yeah, sure.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did what was called private duty, that I just had one person that I would take care of. So, a lot of times it was the same routine day in, day out. So it wasn't really the most challenging type of job.
Right. And so if you were taking care of them, were you drinking on the job at that point?
No.
Okay. So you were still drinking every day, and that continues until 1999?
Correct.
So quite a few years, wasn't it, of just daily drinking, huh?
Yes.
Well, how would you rate those years?
Miserable.
Miserable. Yeah.
Yeah. Just miserable.
Did you ever draw a connection, or did anyone ever try and help you draw the connection between your drinking and the misery of those years?
I did have a friend who we used to spend a lot of time together socially with other friends. And she pointed out to me, I remember going out to lunch with her, and we had a drink at lunch, and then we went back to the car, and she took my hand and she said, "MaryCeline, I think you might have a problem with alcohol." And she told me some things that she had noticed, going to her house for a Super Bowl party, and she said, "It seemed like you were drunk when you came in." And I was, because, I was at that point where I feared that there wouldn't be enough to drink at wherever I was going, so I would drink some beforehand, and they definitely, she noticed that. So, and that was close to the time where my boss at work also noticed. And when I started going to AA.
Yeah. So that was a real gift when he noticed that, or was that just a bump in the road for you?
I would say it was a real gift.
Yeah.
I don't think I was ready yet.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I had further to go.
Yeah.
But it did give me a little bit of insight into AA because I could see it was working for some people, and I could see the love there and the acceptance. I just hadn't surrendered at that point.
Now, in your early attempts, including, I think you said 99, you stayed sober for, 6 years?
About 6 years, yeah.
Were you actually working the program at that point, or were you just going to meetings?
I was going to meetings. I would take, service commitments like the coffee and greeting. I worked with my sponsor. I went through a few different sponsors in the beginning till I found this one woman, and we got to step 4 and 5. And then that was as far as she had gone with her sponsor. So,
wow.
Yeah, we didn't really go any further. I think there was a point in time in AA, what I've heard from different people sharing, that they didn't do the steps the way they're written in the big book, that a lot of people just went to meetings and stayed sober that way.
So after 6 years, you went back out. How many years did you stay out at that point?
2 years.
And then you came back in. What were you thinking when you came back in that after that slip? Did you have any clue as to what went wrong the first time? How were you feeling?
I was feeling at that time, I felt so broken and hopeless. I had a big fear that I wasn't going to be able to get sober and stay sober.
I see.
But when I came back the second time, I do remember seeing women and men who had been there the first time I was there, and they were still there and still sober.
Yeah.
So I had a glimmer of hope that it worked for some people.
Yeah.
So maybe it could work for me.
Yeah.
And what happened was I was at a women's meeting, and a woman came up to me and she asked for my phone number and said, could I give you a call? And she said to me, I went to nursing school with a girl named MaryCeline.
Oh, wow.
And I said, oh, wow, that's crazy.
Wow.
And so she called me, and we were talking. She said, where did you go to nursing school? Went to St. Vincent's in Manhattan.
Right.
She said, oh, so did I. And we talked about what year she had graduated the year before me.
My goodness.
And we're thinking, wow, we were there at the same time. Then she asked me what floor I lived on. And we both lived on the 7th floor. And then I realized something about this woman seemed familiar to me. And I realized that she had been my big sister in nursing school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this was crazy. And I get goosebumps every time I tell this story because she was from New York and I was from New Jersey. We met in nursing school and I hadn't seen her for 36 years. Wow. And here she is. She had moved to New Jersey. She was living in my area, and I run into her in an AA meeting. Wow. And she became my sponsor.
That's amazing.
And she took me through the steps.
Wow.
The way they're written in the big book.
Wow. From big sister to sponsor in a 36-year period. That's amazing.
Yep. Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing.
And that, to me, was divine intervention for sure.
That sounds like a God deal to me. It sure does. Wow. That is so cool. So how long had she been sober by the time you guys got together?
She had been sober 11 years.
So unlike the sponsor you had in your first stint, she had worked all the steps and she was involved in the program?
Very involved, yes.
Yeah, you must have learned a lot from that.
Oh, I did. She was amazing. She spent so much time with me. We read through the big book page by page and, really did thorough steps. And it made all the difference in the world.
Oh, that's wonderful. So you stayed sober at that point until when?
Till now.
Okay, so we're talking the intervening period between the second time you got sober and your last time getting sober.
Well, when I I had that first period.
For 6.
Then I drank for 2 years.
Right.
And then, almost died. Then I had 3 years, but not going to meetings.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay.
And then that brought me to 2013.
Wow, that's amazing. So what was it like going back into the rooms of AA with that kind of person on your side, with a sponsor of that quality?
Oh, it made a huge difference. I can remember feeling, before I met up with her, going back and feeling ashamed and being concerned about how people would look at me, think of me. Mm-hmm. And they really were very loving.
That's great.
And accepting. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that taught me a huge lesson for, how to welcome people. I feel that I can help people who have relapsed. Yeah. I think, God bless the people that walk in the doors and never drink again. Yeah. But that hasn't been my experience. And that promise of no matter how far down the scale we have gone, our experience can benefit others has really come true for me.
I've noticed that too. Whenever people come back, the degree to which the people who were there while that person was out, welcoming them back and assuring them that the only thing that's changed is their sobriety date and nothing they learned the first time is eradicated, but instead it goes into the experience column for them and being able to know what it's like. So, MaryCeline, you have something that I don't have. At 33 years, what I don't have that you do have is the experience of having gone out and come back in. And I don't know if I ever went out that I'd make it back in, because of the feeling that this is something I've worked hard for many, many years, and I've done it for so long that to go out would be throwing away a huge, huge, important part of my life. So the kind of experience and extraordinary insights that you're able to bring back in, given what happened to you, I think is such a gift to the people who are in the program. So how long did it take you to get through the 12 steps?
We started from scratch and went through the steps the way she had been taken through them with her sponsor. Mm-hmm. We met every week for the first few steps. And then, when we got to 4 and 5, it was every other week, and we spent a few weeks on those. I would say, we went through in a couple of months.
Cool.
Maybe 3 months. And at this time, I looked at the program so much differently. I did lose my job as a result of that relapse. I wasn't working, and I completely immersed myself in the program. Where I lived, we were really fortunate because there were many, many meetings. Yeah. And, I went to 2, sometimes 3 meetings a day. Yeah. And stayed really close to her and really got into, as they say in England, in the middle of the bed. I'm used to in the middle of the herd. Yeah. So I got a good network of really strong, sober women, and I followed the suggestions that I had kind of taken hit or miss the first time around.
That's terrific. Do you remember the first time in this most recent period of sobriety that you were finally able to exhale in terms of your membership in Alcoholics Anonymous, where you finally felt like maybe you were in the middle of the bed or the middle of the herd?
I would say shortly after meeting my sponsor. Reconnecting with her. I remember feeling that pretty early on. Going back to when I really feel like I was, felt like I could breathe. Yeah. I would say after we did 4 and 5 again. And then when I started moving on, and when I made my amends, that really gave me, doing 4 and 5 this time with this sponsor really kind of gave me a sense of relief and freedom. The first time I was in, I know now looking back that I really wasn't honest.
Sure.
I didn't realize it at the time, but I wasn't able to, my things, I had to be broken down. I was so afraid to ask for help. I was so afraid to say, I want to drink. I couldn't even be honest with myself. So the second time around, I really was able to be very honest and open.
Yeah, that's great. That's kind of how it was with me and my sponsor, where once he had taken me through the steps, I finally felt like I was a member of AA, because I had lied so long in meetings about where I was at in a program that I wasn't working, but trying to convince everybody that I was, that when he said you got to get in the middle of the herd and you'll know it when you get there, that's kind of like it was for me too. Speaking of service work and other things, were you involved in sponsorship, or what did your service work look like in your number of years you've been sober?
After I went through the steps with my sponsor, Eileen, then she said, you're ready to sponsor other women. And I have sponsored, a fair number of women. Some have stayed, some have not, I have had a sponsee who just couldn't get honest about her drinking, and she died. It's heartbreaking. And I said to her, I know, I've been where you are, but, they say we can't give it away,
Yeah.
The person has to want it. But I've found tremendous gratitude in sitting down with a sponsee and going through the book and doing the work. And that just reinforces my gratitude for the program. I feel like it's really strengthened my sobriety. And, I try to reach my hand out whenever I can. And I find I don't push myself on people. I find that if I let it be, the people who need to work with me will find me, and vice versa.
Yeah. And the whole thing about Alcoholics Anonymous being a program of attraction, I think there's no more obvious place that is true than in the people who approach us to be their sponsors.
Oh, definitely.
Because I've always felt like the guys who I sponsor, and I sponsored a lot of men over the years, and a number of them are still around with long-term sobriety, but it seems like their issues, strangely enough, are my issues. Their difficulties and struggles are mine. And sometimes I think my higher power kind of sets that up in a way to not only help me help them, but to help me and to help them help me. And it's just a beautiful synergy. Have you found that to be the case as well?
Yes. And what I do, I remember the first time that I was in, they said, get a sponsor. So I just randomly picked someone. And I can remember when feeling like it wasn't really comfortable for me, but looking at it is like, oh, I can't tell her I want to work with somebody else. Yeah. And so when I meet women today and they ask me to be their sponsor, I always say, explain to them in the beginning, this isn't a marriage, and, we'll try it, we'll do temporary until we make sure that we're both comfortable. And
that's great.
If you feel that this isn't right for you, then you can find another woman, but I'll be here until, if you feel comfortable. And so that's worked out well for both of us, and I have had sponsees that I've had to let go. I did work in the field for a little while, and they had a saying, if you're working harder than they are, there's something wrong. And I had a girl who was doing well, and we started on the steps, and we were up to 8, and she was getting things back and was very busy, and I said, we really need to get back on the steps, and she just said, well, if you really want me to do them, and I said, that's not what it's about. You need to want them. So
yeah. And I know I'm kind of the same way as you are in that I meet people where they are, and I try and help them, but I don't push them. I think the days of sponsors saying, don't call me until you've done your 4th step, those days have come and gone. I'm much gentler about that. And I basically say, if we cannot move on with the steps until you do the step that needs to be done. So I perceive you have the same approach towards that.
Exactly.
Let me ask you, in the remaining time that we have, MaryCeline, can you recall any times during the past 8 years where you've faced some really significant challenges or occurrences or events that stretched the limits of your sobriety or made you think maybe I ought to take a drink and you didn't?
No. There hasn't been a time. I've had circumstances. I lost my job. I got laid off.
Yeah.
That job in the field, which I loved, I lost that. I got laid off, and I was really sad about that. And then a couple months later, I ended up in the hospital, pretty sick with an autoimmune disease.
Yeah.
And I was in the hospital for a week, and I had no insurance, and it was a little scary time, and I was really quite sick. So I had no insurance, no job, no money. The thought of having a drink absolutely never crossed my mind. And I haven't had that obsession.
It's wonderful.
And desire to drink has been removed from me. I feel so firmly entrenched in AA that, I haven't had any desire. And I'm really grateful for that, because I did struggle with that the first time around, that obsession.
Quite a spiritual bank account if you got through all of that without drinking. Sounds like you were working the kind of program that supports us through that experience.
I believe so.
Yeah.
I really feel carried. I feel that today I have that faith that no matter what I have to go through, I'll be okay. I really have that belief that I am never alone. I feel really connected these days to the program and to the fellowship. I have to say, too, over the past year plus since we've been in lockdown, I just looked at this as an amazing opportunity. I have gone to more meetings I love it. I love it. It has been such a gift. I think that I can get on a meeting and be with, I'm getting goosebumps again, can get on a meeting and be with people from all these different countries all around the world and still have that connection. And we had the same problem and we have the same solution today. And it's been amazing. And I feel like this has really enriched my sobriety and given me so much more gratitude.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about some of the gifts that you've experienced over the last 8 years, but it sounds to me like you just listed one of your favorite gifts of the program, and I know it's been that way for me as well.
One other huge gift is now my daughter is she'll be 33 on Sunday. 4 years ago, she got a job offer in Florida, and I had lived my whole life, as I told you, in New Jersey within pretty much a 5-mile radius. And never could picture myself moving. And when she moved to Florida, she said, why don't you move down here? And when I got laid off from that job and, after I had that health issue, I decided I would move down here with her. So I'm really grateful for that today. I've retired from nursing. I love my life today. But the first thing I did as soon as I got myself settled where I was living was to go find meetings, because I knew that I needed to connect with AA right away and, meet my new people. So I went to that beach meeting and started making my connections here.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what that was like for you, because I think it was my last guest, Emily, who talked about when she moved from Kansas to Houston and how difficult it was because the meetings weren't like they were where she was. And how did you find the adjustment to meetings and to the people in AA in Florida?
That was a little bit of an adjustment. It feels like here the meetings are more fragmented. Where I lived in New Jersey, we would have people that would come for vacation for the summer because it was by the beach.
I see.
And down here, there are a lot of snowbirds, people that come for the winter and then leave. So when I lived in New Jersey, I would see the same people almost every day at different meetings. We could support each other in our progress and in sobriety and more of a community feel. Here, it's a little more separate. Like I'll see somebody at this meeting, I won't see him until a week later at the next meeting.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit of a challenge for me. But, I always find that I gravitate towards the people that I need to be with. And I found an amazing sponsor down here. And
oh, you did?
Yes. I did at that beach meeting. So,
Wow.
So, and she's a nurse too. So,
wow. So, and she helped hook you up with meetings and people and that sort of thing?
She did, and other people that I met along the way. So I just did, trial and error too. It was a whole new story. So go to different meetings to find where I felt I fit and am getting what I need.
So as we wrap up, could I say you are living in contented sobriety?
Oh, yes, definitely. Definitely. No, I love my life today, and I know that that's due to my sobriety, and I wouldn't have my sobriety if it weren't for the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and the fellowship.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel the same way, and it came through loud and clear today in our discussion, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. This has been really beautiful, MaryCeline, and I've so enjoyed getting to know you during the time we spent together today, but little bits and pieces of you over the last year. It's been really remarkable.
I know. It's an amazing situation. I know. I love when it says in the big book where people who would normally not mix, and through this pandemic where I'm meeting people that I never would have had the gift of meeting.
Yeah.
So I've enjoyed meeting you too so much and seeing you on different meetings here and there. So, and I thank you so much for asking me to do this.
Thank you. I love you, and I appreciate your candor today, because a lot of people come into this really kind of nervous about what they should and shouldn't say. But what I find is that when they're just talking from the heart, everything that needs to be said is said. Does that make sense? Yeah.
It does. And I used to be so afraid to let people see me, but now it's like, this is who I am, and speak from my heart. I get so much when other people speak from the heart.
Yeah.
I hope I said something that might help somebody somewhere along the way.
And there's no telling who hears it, who does something a little different just because of something you said. We don't know how we're going to touch people's lives, but I feel pretty certain that some of the things you said today will strike a responsive chord with other women out there. Those who've had the same struggles or not, or those who identify with the kind of sobriety you've had, which to me is just a beautiful thing. So again, many thanks.
Love you, Howard. Thank you.
Well, my friends, that's a wrap for today's episode of AA Recovery Interviews. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed AA Recovery Interviews, will you please tell others how to listen to it? Think of it as a little AA service that spreads the word about this rich and meaningful listening experience. It's yet another helping hand we can all extend to alcoholics everywhere. Visit our website, aarecoveryinterviews.com, where you can listen to every episode of AA Recovery Interviews. And if you want to contact me directly with any comments or suggestions, simply email howard@aarecoveryinterviews.com. By the way, this podcast strictly adheres to AA's 12 traditions and all General Service Office guidelines for safeguarding anonymity online. I pay all production costs, and no one receives financial gain from the show. AA Recovery Interviews and my guests do not speak for or represent AA at large. This podcast is simply my way of giving back to AA that which has been so freely given to me. The next new episode of AA Recovery Interviews is on the way, so keep coming back. It'll be here soon.